Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. All right, so the Suzuki V-Strom 800DE. All of you V-Strom fans out there have just been pestering me for more content on the V-Strom. We love the V-Strom. So here we go. You're going to like this video today. So I am actually getting this V-Strom 800DE Adventure ready to ride the Northern California Backcountry Discovery Route, or BDR. The BDRs are routes here that we have in the United States that are mostly off-road touring routes, and there's a nonprofit organization called Backcountry Discovery Routes that puts these together. So go check them out, and also stay tuned for my full-length documentary film that I'll be filming about the Northern California BDR, the 950-mile, mostly off-road ride through Northern California with this bike. So in order to get this bike ready for a trip like that, which is on and off-road adventure touring with full camping gear and living off the bike for 7 or 8 days straight, so we've got all of our stuff with us, there's some key upgrades that I have to make. So in this video, I'm going to talk you through some of the upgrades and accessories that I have on this V-Strom 800DE, some of the pros and cons to that, and kind of how these things worked out. We'll also give you a summary of how I feel about the pros and cons of this bike in general, and compared also to bikes like the Transalp and the Tenere 700. All right, so let's jump in and talk about the upgrades that I've done. Now, I only have one favor to ask. If you're purchasing anything at all, whether for your V-Strom or riding gear for yourself or any other motorcycle parts or accessories, I'm always going to have affiliate links below in a pinned comment and a description. And using those affiliate links is a huge help in supporting this channel and allowing this kind of independent journalism to continue. So please do that, and thank you so much for doing that. That's also my disclaimer. Some of the parts you see in these videos I get for free, some at a discount, and some I pay for full price. So there's a disclaimer for that. So the most important thing to me on a bike like this that's going to go down, it's going to fall over and crash off-road, because that's what happens, is crash protection. So I want to be able to drop the bike and not have any damage that would prevent me from continuing to ride. So thankfully, this adventure model comes with factory crash bars and a factory skid plate, and they're very good. I have zero reason to want to upgrade either of those items. I should mention that the Adventure also comes with factory metal pannier boxes, but I've elected to use Lone Rider soft bags, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So the only crash protection accessory that I've had to add to this bike are the Barkbuster VPS 2-point mount handguards. I love Barkbuster handguards, and the nice thing about these, they are a specific kit for the V-Strom 800DE, so they have a factory fit. You know, they have their own bar end weights that integrate into the handguards, and of course you can get the yellow spoilers, which you just have to get when you've got this yellow V-Strom. So these are awesome. I love those. Okay, next most important thing that I needed to upgrade were the tires. The factory tires actually were the subject of a recall by Suzuki. There was some sort of defect in the manufacturing, but I had planned to change them out anyway because they were not going to be adequate for the off-road conditions that I plan to ride in. If you're going to ride your adventure bike off-road, you just need knobby tires. It's really as simple as that, because it's all good and fine if you're just on a dirt road, but what about when you hit mud, sand, deep gravel, snow, steep hills, whatever? You just need to be ready, and having knobby tires is the only way to go. So Heidenau graciously sent me a set of their K60 Rangers. I've really been wanting to test these. These are one of the only adventure tires that I've never tested before. So thank you so much, Heidenau, for sending these out to me. My initial impressions of these K60 Rangers is very, very positive. They are very quiet for a knobby tire on the highway, although keep in mind these tires are new, so they could get louder as they wear and you know, get some wear on them. They feel good on-road and they feel good off-road. So my initial impressions are super positive. They're also fairly affordable if you compare to some other brands out there. So more long-term testing later once we get more miles on the bike, but so far really like these Heidenau tires. Now the V-Strom has tube-type rims. A lot of people have gotten kind of annoyed by that. People are saying they want tubeless, so it's pros and cons. It's really not the case that tubeless is just better, period. It's more nuanced than that. So the advantages you might have, that you do have to a tube setup, is that if you dent your front wheel, or your back wheel, I suppose, which is somewhat an often you know, occurrence when you do adventure riding and you hit something hard, With a tube tire, even if you bend that rim, you're not going to lose your air seal. So you still have air in the tube, even if you damage and bend the rim, which may not be the case with a tubeless type rim. The other thing is, if you break the tire bead off the wheel because you have to do a repair or you lose pressure, how are you going to reseat a tubeless bead when you're out in the field unless you have like some huge compressor, which you're not going to have with you? So there are advantages of the tube setup. I admit tubeless is more convenient just to put a plug in, but I'm okay with the tubes personally, but just keep in mind there are pros and cons. All right, next up, let's talk about the lighting. So a lot of you viewers have pointed out, a lot of the owners of the V-Strom 800 have pointed out that the factory lights are not very good. And I found that to be the case. They are not very good lights from the factory. You have a hard time seeing, especially when it dips down like into the corners. So Cyclops sent out to me their plug-and-play lighting kit for this bike. It plugs into the factory wiring harness, no splicing at all, completely removable, no modifications. And they give you mounts depending on what kind of setup you have. I got the mounts for the crash bars because my bike has crash bars. Plug and play, I'm using the Pegasus lights, although they have several other options depending on your needs. The Cyclops light kits are really great because you get a lot of good light and you can pick from different colors of the lenses, and they're very affordably priced. So I'm a huge fan of Cyclops and I like to use them on a lot of my bike builds. All right, next up, let's talk about navigation. So I need to be able to load a GPS track and follow the BDR route or follow other GPS tracks. And I want to have, you know, a nav system on my bike. It's just a necessary thing for adventure riding. I don't like to use my phone on the handlebar. I just don't like that. The phone gets dusty and wet and it drains the battery, it overheats in the sun. I don't like doing that. So I elected to go with CarPuride tablet. It gives me, I'm an Android user, so it gives me Android Auto on my, I got the 7-inch model and I mounted it to the factory navigation crossbar up there above the instruments, which is nice that Suzuki has that on this bike. And this works great. I've been testing it out. I can use Gaia or Onyx or Google Maps or, you know, whatever kind of mapping application I want, and I get my tracks loaded in there. It all syncs up to my phone. I can control my Cardo headset and do any of my music apps that I want. This is a great solution. They're extremely affordable for what they are. You know, somewhere I have a discount code for CarPuride and I'm going to put, I think it's 30% off. I'm going to put that below, so be sure you use that. Again, this is a 7-inch model. They have a 5-inch model. They have all different sizes and setups you can get. But I'm a huge fan of these. I'm also putting one on my new KTM 350. I got a smaller one. So anyway, I'm doing a comprehensive navigation setup video with comparing all the systems here in the next month or so. It's just a lot of work to put that together. But I really like this CarPuride tablet. It fits my needs perfectly and it's very easy to use. Okay, wind protection on the 800DE. So the factory windshield was kind of small and I felt like I needed a bit more wind coverage for my upper body. So Suzuki sent the accessory tall windshield, which is affordably priced and well made, and it looks, you know, nice on the bike. It installs with 4 screws. However, I did find at my height, about 5'10" or 1.78 meter, that I had quite a bit of wind buffeting with this taller shield. It seemed to put the air kind of right at the beak of my Arai XD5 helmet. So I went ahead and threw on a Puig clip-on wind visor. I use these on a lot of my bike builds, you know, if you've watched my other videos. That really worked. It really cleaned up the airflow in this, and I can adjust the airflow. So this setup is great. Really good wind coverage, adjustable airflow with that visor from Puig, and I'll link that here below. All right, let's talk about luggage. So I mentioned that the Adventure model came with those aluminum panniers, which are actually manufactured by SW Motex. They're Trax cases, more or less. And they're very, very nice luggage. Really like them. However, for off-road riding, ultimately, I don't trust hard panniers. I've tried that before in the past, and I almost broke my ankle doing that, or broke my leg doing that. Just because if your leg gets swept back, or you put your leg down for something and you're going slow, or whatever, the bike falls over, whatever the case is, too many situations where you can get yourself hurt with the hard boxes. Plus, if you damage the hard boxes, you know, you lose your waterproofing. Sometimes you can't mount them back on the bike because things get too bent. So I'm a soft luggage person for off-road riding, period. For on-road touring, different story. I'd go with hard bags, but for adventure riding with off-road, I'm gonna go soft luggage. So I I went with the Lone Rider Moto bags. Now they sent these out to me to test. So I got the offset kit, which is I believe a 31 and a 38. And I've also got their, I believe it's a 40-liter Overlander duffel. This luggage is really, really premium quality, easy to use, has tons of space inside, mounts really well, is well thought out with all the options that they give you. And I'll be talking more about it later. But this is the luggage I want to use for the BDR. Now, a few things about this. The factory luggage racks for the metal cases that this bike came with, I initially mounted these bags onto those racks, but what I found was the bags were too high. So what the factory did with the factory racks is, because the exhaust kind of sticks out to the side, they put the luggage racks above the exhaust and brought the luggage racks in narrower to the bike. However, that pushed the panniers up really, really too high, and it just was awkward. So Rocky Mountain ATV saved the day for me. They sent out their new Tusk racks for the 800DE, and you know, they're obviously designed to use like their Olympus bags or other soft bags. That's fine, but you can adapt these Tusk racks to use a lot of different bags. I was able to mount the Lone Rider bags on here, and this has moved the luggage down to an acceptable point, and I really like the positioning of them now. They're a little bit wider, but that's okay. At least they're nice and low down. Now, with the Lone Rider bags, they're going to come with a quick release system. On the factory racks, I could not use that quick release system because of the shape of the rack. It wasn't really tubular. It was almost like a rectangular kind of shape, which was very strange. And then the Tusk racks, I think I probably could get the quick release system to work. But since I already had the fixed mounting system set up with the Moto bags, I just went with that. So it's just some bolts they fix to the rack, and then you can easily unscrew them. I'm really happy with the setup, and I'll talk more about this stuff later. Now, for a tank bag, I went with the Rig Gear Hurricane waterproof tank bag. It fits the bike really well, has a little pop of yellow, which, yeah, I like my little yellow accents. I cut a hole in it for a charging cable. I ran power up into the tank bag so I can charge devices overnight at camp or while I'm riding. That was important to me. I like this tank bag. Waterproof is important to me. I don't like to use any luggage that is not waterproof. I just don't have time to worry about stuff getting wet. It's just not worth it. All right, then one of the next things I did to the bike was I added Veridian cruise control. This is fully electronic cruise control. Now, I have a dedicated video that I made about the cruise control system because they make cruise control for a lot of different motorcycles. So I want to make a dedicated video about that. If you're ordering Veridian Cruise, I have a discount code good for 12% off, which is significant. I think it's Big Rock Moto, but I'll put that down below in the text just to be sure. Make sure you use that if you buy Veridian Cruise system. It's plug and play on this bike. You do have to remove the fuel tank, which actually is pretty easy, pretty simple. And you could do the install in under an hour easily, even if you're just a moderate mechanical skill. There'll be a separate video on that, but they've got a new switch now, which has up and down speed, which is great improvement from the old switch. Also, you don't have to remove the controls of the handlebar anymore because the switch has a screw type mount that you can undo, and then you don't have to move any controls around to get that to get the control on the handlebar. So huge fan of that. Stay tuned for that separate video. All right, the next thing that I tackled with getting the V-Strom ready, this is a very important thing, and I hope everyone's still watching at this point in the video. Setting the sag of the rear suspension. So on any motorcycle, setting the rear sag of the rear shock, of the rear suspension, which is the ride height of the bike, you know, once you sit in it with all your luggage and everything ready to go, that has a dramatic effect, good or bad, on the handling and stability of your motorcycle. So I use a tool called the Moto Slacker. It's an electronic tool that connects to my phone. I just use my phone for the remote. Has a magnet, goes on the swing arm at the axle, put a little cable, and then it measures as I sit on the bike. I can do it all by myself, the sag. So you should have, on most motorcycles, generally speaking, around 30%. Typically, yeah, 30%, maybe 1/3, which would be 33% riding sag. That means geared up with your helmet, camelback, all your luggage that you're going to use, you should have about 30% sag, 30% of your suspension travel, used up. It's called the rider sag or riding sag. Unfortunately, the V-Strom is so incredibly softly suspended and undersprung for any average rider's weight, even without luggage, that with all the luggage, with my camping gear, and with myself in riding gear, and I'm about 200 pounds or 90 kilograms, I had about 45% sag. That's with the preload maxed out all the way in. It has a hydraulic preload adjuster. With that all the way in, I still had 45% sag, which is way too much. I'm using half the suspension just sitting on the bike. So that just goes to show you how undersprung these Japanese motorcycles are. And this is not just Suzuki. Everyone's guilty of this. So it's going to be a pretty big problem, honestly, but I've got to ride the bike anyway. I don't have a choice, and I don't have time to change the suspension out before the trip. So yeah, it negatively affects the handling, and I've lost half my travel just sitting on it. So that's a bummer. But if you have ideas, if you're out there and you have ideas, maybe you're a V-Strom owner, on how I can improve the springs on this bike or change the springs out, what are the good options for that? Drop that down in the comments below. I'd really love to know. Maybe that's something we'll tackle once I get home from the trip. Finally, the last thing I did was, after I got some break-in miles on the bike, I did an oil and oil filter change, which was very, very easy. 4 bolts to drop the factory skid plate down, super simple. And then 1 drain plug and a spin-on automotive type oil filter. I use Suzuki OEM filter and Suzuki OEM 1040 mineral oil because that's what they specified. You know, it's really like a 10-minute job. It takes around 3.2 liters, somewhere in there, 3.5 quarts, somewhere in that range. Super easy to do. I actually just did it before filming this video. All right, so how does the V-Strom perform now that I've done all these changes? So on the highway, of course, the cruise control is phenomenal to have that. And I should pause for a second and say that's why I really appreciate the V-Strom and the Transalp. The same goes for the Transalp, because unlike the Tenere 700, which is a cable throttle, the V-Strom is ride-by-wire, which means we have access to this kind of electronic cruise control from the aftermarket that's only 300 bucks. That's amazing. So I love having that. The wind protection, so yeah, the windshield, we kind of already talked about it, but it's pretty good coverage now with the taller Suzuki windshield and with that accessory Puig visor. So I'm pretty happy with that. Off-road, so okay, we already talked about the issue with the springs being too soft, and I'm going to talk about it again now because I just want to keep bringing this up until these manufacturers start to get the idea that maybe they need to put proper springs in these motorcycles. Honestly, this bike is probably sprung for like a 150-pound rider with 0 luggage, not even like a Kleenex or a tube of chapstick, like nothing. Then maybe the spring rate would be appropriate. But for a 200-pound rider with some camping gear on the back, which is how most people are going to use this motorcycle, it is grossly undersprung. So now off-road, with all the camping gear and all the panniers and everything, riding it off-road, even in a moderate rut or moderate bump, I can bottom both ends of the suspension, even riding it like a slow to moderate speed. So I definitely have to slow way down in order to ride this in this setup off-road. That being said, it is stable, predictable. The engine is incredibly smooth and tractable. You can tractor in second gear and never even shift. It doesn't stall. Super smooth throttle. The suspension is very soft and plush and comfortable. And it's an easy, relaxing bike to ride as long as you don't want to ride quick at all. Any sort of fast riding is off the table with this bike. But for gravel road cruising, this bike is phenomenal. So I just have to keep my speed in check. All right, so as sort of a review update, what are the pros and cons of the V-Strom 800DE so far? I've had it for a couple months now. For me, the pros, the engine, I love the engine of this bike. This bike is easy and safe and predictable to ride. The fuel range and fuel economy is very good. The off-road handling is very stable. So it has a very stable rake angle. And even in sand or loose terrain, it's very confidence-inspiring. The DIY maintenance for home maintenance and stuff, for oil changes and air filter access is under the seat, so that's great. No digging under the gas tank to get the air filters. The overall ownership experience, I think, is very good. Plus, it's a V-Strom, and when have you ever heard of a V-Strom breaking down? It just doesn't ever happen. These are absolutely solid. So for stacking a lot of miles, riding around the world or doing a lot of touring, or you just don't want to worry about reliability, get a Suzuki V-Strom. Amazing bike in that regard. What are the downsides of this bike? So the engine puts out an enormous amount of heat. I mean, this bike, my legs feel like I'm in an oven. It is really hot, and I'm not exaggerating. And it is, I didn't want to ride this bike in the heat of summer. I did 1 or 2 rides in it, and I parked it. I was like, it's too hot. Now that it's actually cold, strangely in September, it's actually gotten like downright cold. I'm in like waterproof gear. It's not bad, but man, in hot weather, I was getting roasted. The engine does have some vibration. We've talked about the poorly sprung suspension and the weight. You know, it's a heavy bike compared to a T7 and a Transalp undercut this bike by about 60 pounds or about 25 kilograms. That is a big difference in weight, and there's really no getting around that. Now, do I think this is a better motorcycle than a Tenere 700 or a Transalp 750? In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. It's just not black and white. It's not that simple. We'll do a more detailed video about this subject, comparing these 3 bikes later. There's some things I like better, and there's some things I don't like as much. As an overall package, it's very, very good, and might be my choice between those 3. All right, well, that is about a wrap on the upgrades for the V-Strom 800DE and sort of an update to this video series review. Stay tuned, because that Northern California BDR film, that's happening in just a couple days. So I'll be doing that, and there'll be a great kind of expedition type film series with this motorcycle, the way you see it. I'm excited about it, so I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Again, if you're purchasing anything, please use my links that help support the channel. Thank you so much for watching. Ride safe, and I'll see you out there.